So we're on Lamed Beis, where the first mimer was the third line from the top. Amar Nasan bar Abba Amarav. So that was a whole section dealing with fixing up the wick on Yom Tov. How do we deal with this bit of charcoal at the end? You know, sometimes when you have a wick that was used before, it ends up having a big glob of something that looks like charcoal at the end, which can inhibit the light from shining properly. So you want to remove it. So he said you can remove it on Yom Tov. And then we brought a Beitsa that actually lists 6 things, amongst them the one that was just mentioned, that apply to Yom Tov and caring for a wick on Yom Tov. Then we had another mimer of the same Amora, Amarav Nasan bar Abba Amarav, this time more of what we call a Gadata. Certain people don't do tzedakah properly, so they're going to go to Gehenna, and he elaborates on that. And finally, we have a third mimer, the same 2 Amoraim together, Amarav Nasan bar Abba Amarav, and that has to do with a person who sort of looks forward to getting a handout. He's not going to have a happy life. That's what we seem to learn from that. So this is all stemming from the original subject, which we had really been talking about for quite some time, caring for the wick on Yom Tov. Since one of the last halachas was brought in the name of a certain, not as common Amora, Rav Nasan bar Abba, in the name of Rav. So we list a few more things that he said, even though they're not on the subject of Yom Tov, and therefore it's definitely straying from the topic, but more likes to do that, keeps different mimarim of the same rabbi together. So we had an opportunity to learn what's called a gadata, a little bit of musar, a little bit of ethics, which is always refreshing, which really goes all the way down to the Mishnah. So if we want to review that, any part of that, let's do so now, and then if not, we'll start the new Mishnah. Let the 3 judges decide.
Go to the review again. Check the Beitsa. Oh, I don't think we did the last 3 lines actually.
Okay, then that decides it. We have to do that. So from where would you like to start? Keeping in mind that first of all, you also should know that there was a Shabbatai in the Gemora. It was a very exciting moment for us. Shabbatai got very excited, I think. Although it was a bit of a harsh story, so maybe that brought up bad memories for Shabbatai, I don't know. Yeah, it was a different Shabbatai. It was a Bar Marinos. We had a whole question about that name. In any event, so since Jack is here at the behest of Shabbatai, perhaps we should make sure they decide where to start, so we have everyone feeling good about the fact that they showed up in the deluge. It's not a French one. It sounds French. It's English. Probably English. All right. So wherever you decide.
Amar Nasan bar Abba.
There's 3 of them, so which one are you choosing?
The beginning one. The call. Assyria Baba.
The second one. The first one was about Mochdi Nasapsila, 30 lines from the top. That's fine, we don't have to go back to that one, just so remember that it's
Second one.
3 mimarim from this famous rabbi, Rav Nasan bar Abba Amarav. And you want to start from the second one, okay. So So how many lines from the top is that? Approximately. Looks like it might be about 15 lines from the top. First words on the line, although that wouldn't be the beginning of our section, the end of the last section is Befi Shtei Neros. See that? Back?
So you think it's 15 miles down?
Well, maybe not exactly,
I
maybe a
see
little
here
bit
it
less.
says the fish stay neros.
Yes. And that was, Vi Amar, okay. Now, why to say Vi Amar instead of just Amar? Because it's, again, the Gemora telling us, and there's another mimer we have in the name of this rabbi. That's why it says the Bub. Okay? You want to try it, Jack? To get your feet wet, so to speak?
Rav Natan Bar Abba Amar. Rav.
Right.
Atiri. The whole your day.
Bavel.
Bavel. Atiri. Bavel. Your day. Gehenna.
Mm-hmm.
Haim.
Let's stop there. What's he saying? Shabbatai caught this yesterday. It was very astute of him that the word atire, as long as we know we're in Aramaic, we can work our way backwards to Hebrew, right? We have a rule, famous rule, that if you have a shin in a particular word in Hebrew, it will surface as a tav in Aramaic usually. So you can work your way backwards as well. If you have a word with a tav in it, you can work your way backwards and see the word probably, which you do know from Hebrew, is with a shin.
So this Ashira is the wealthy above.
Exactly. He's making a critique of the wealthy people above him.
Pretty bad.
So the word haim is the beginning of this phrase. They are Gehenna. They are people who are eligible to go on a journey, to go down to Gehenna. Right? In other words, they've done some serious averas, which I would think he's going to start talking about what normally wealthy people do. Right? The wealthier type of averas, adultery, this, that, and the other. He doesn't talk about that, which is interesting. That doesn't mean they don't do that, or maybe even if they don't do that, they're still going to Gehenna for some other infraction which he feels is extremely noteworthy. So to explain his claim against them, he brings an example.
And ki ha ishpat.
Here it is, Shabbatai.
Shabta. Bar Merus.
Yeah.
Some
So ki ha would mean what?
from.
Well, you're backing up a story, something you just said with a story. You just said the wealthy are going to go to Gehenna. The wealthy people above are going to go to Gehenna. You want to bring a story to back that up. So how would you, even in English, how would you back that up? If you wanted to bring a story to back up something you're saying.
So because of it.
No, you bring an example of what you're talking about. Ki ha, like that, or like this story. In other words, the story. De, of, the story of. Yeah. Let's assume he's a tzaddik, because most Shabbatais we know are tzaddikim. And also, it makes the story a little bit easier to swallow that this is an example of them doing the wrong thing. If he was a bad person, then what he's about to say doesn't make sense, that it doesn't reflect badly on Bavel. But if he's a tzaddik and they still mistreated him, then it's certainly a big critique against them. So if he's using this as an example of why they're Yor to Gehenna, then it must be that he was a very righteous man, or at least a somewhat righteous man, a normal guy who doesn't appear to be a Rasha. Here, this person, what happened to him? What happened to Shabbatai Bar Marinus?
Akla Levavel.
Ikla Levavel. The word Ikla actually is in many stories in the Gemora. It's kind of like he arrived or he came to a certain place.
Okay.
In this case, he came to
Bavel.
Bavel. And usually in those days, people came to Bavel from Eretz Yisrael, right? Because where else did Jews live? They didn't really live in more than 2 places in the world in those days. Eretz Yisrael and Bavel. So it says he came to Bavel. It doesn't say he came to a certain place in Bavel. Then you could say he came from one place in Bavel to another place in Bavel. It doesn't say that. It says he came to Bavel. Sounds like he wasn't in Bavel and he came to Bavel. Where would he be if he came to Bavel? Probably came from Eretz Yisrael. So basically, it's a new immigrant, right? We're talking about a new immigrant, a guy who just now showed up. And how do you treat people who just showed up in your community, right? How was Lot treated by the people of Sodom? Horribly. And what was their fate? They got punished severely. Right? So, actually, Lot ended up becoming of some of the angels, right, were mistreated. Okay, so he came to Bavel, and then, here's the interesting part of the story. Right, so we know the verb ba, base ayin, even without the aleph, which is like a hey, just the root base ayin, which often appears with a yud, boy, or something along those lines. A number of permutations of this word show up in many Gemoras. Mean, basically, we've always said they mean one of 3 things. Remember the 3?
Require, need.
Require, need is the same.
Need, ask.
Those are 2. Need, ask, one more, want. Need or ask or want. So this could be any one of those, but what would you think if someone shows up in the community and all of a sudden, what would he do? He would ask. He would ask for help. He's going to ask for help. What he specifically asked for a specific thing. He asked Minayu from, what does that mean? Minayu from, last word in the line, Minayu. From them. Right? And who do you think he's asking from? Who are the them? Who's the them? Who's this whole story supposed to show us about? Remember the introduction? The original statement of Rav Nassan Bar Abba. Remember what was he trying to make a general statement about before we brought in the story of Shabbatai? Remember how we just started this whole section? That's important to keep in mind. Then the whole story fits into place. No, not way up there. We didn't start so far up. We just started a few lines up. Remember we started with the lines that has in the beginning Bevish Shtei wrote. And then we had Amarav Nassim Bar Abba Amarav. What did he say there? Let's just keep that in mind. Atire Bavel. Are you finding it, Janek?
Yeah, the Ashire. See the Ashire, Bavel.
Are
they Gehenna. The Lord of Gehenna.
right. So he made a critique against a certain group of people. Which group? The wealthy of Bavel. So now when it says Shabbatai arrived in Bavel, and he asked them for a favor, who's the them? The wealthy. Some of the wealthy people. He went around either individually, he asked different wealthy people, or maybe there was a place like a shul, and where he was asking for help and they didn't help. Just a minute.
That's all.
Go to.
Huh? No copyright?
He's got a good hat. He's got a good hat to protect himself.
Strident's also pretty bad.
I don't have a lot of experience, but I'll take your word.
It was once a great stride.
Right, big stride. To us, it reminds you of baby crying. Childhood experience of
The old expression, if the shoe fits where it can be readjusted to if the hat fits where it. I'm sure you have a special hat for winter in Montreal.
Yeah. Sheepskin. But mine is 30 below, you need to have protection. I don't know what this is. If you've been here for a while, you forget about these things.
Alright, so again, he asked them for a favor. Who's the them? He asked the wealthy of Bavel for a favor. What did he specifically ask them for? What was the favor he was asking them for? You know where we are now? Under the word Shabbatai. First one in the line is dish. Iska.
Iska.
You know what that is? An iska? Like some people, when they borrow money, they use a heter iska. Iska, right? We know the famous, just like we said a moment ago, that atire can mean ashire because of the change of shin to tav. There's another trick for understanding words to peel away the sort of camouflage. Is that at the end of a word in Aramaic you're likely to have an aleph. But really that's just, instead of a hey, in Hebrew it would be a hey at the end. And even that isn't part of the root, obviously. So what's the real word here?
Asik.
Asik.
Business.
That's right, business. So how can I ask business? How do you ask someone for business? So if you have a particular thing you're selling, asking for business, like asking you to purchase my wares. But then it would be strange to say he asked for them. So you say he was trying to sell this thing. To ask for business is another way of saying to ask for merchandise, to borrow merchandise, which used to be done in those days. For example, when people got married, I'm sure you've heard of the dowry system, Nadunya. So in the olden days, and it was actually written into the Kesubah in a special way, how the woman brought into the marriage from her father, and that was usually what they discussed when they would discuss a wedding, more than the actual wedding, which is what we normally like to talk about today. What are you going to do for the wedding? What are you going to do for the apartment? In those days, what are you doing for the Nadunya? Why? Because the father-in-law usually provided merchandise. So many barrels of wine, or so many yards of wool, anything that you could then take and turn around and start a business.
Yeah.
That's really what business meant. Business meant merchandise which can then be peddled and with a small profit even, and then that can be the basis for a future business. Start to sell and then buying new stock And again, sell at a small margin of profit, and that's how businesses start, right? Most of us are not in that kind of line where we are used to buying and selling merchandise, but that's always been a very lucrative way of starting business. And we have all the Yidden on the Lower East Side who used to sell shmatas. Later became wealthy dressmakers or wealthy tailors. They started with shmatas, right, pushing the cart around. But that's the principle. And then in Jews all over America, that's how they, probably in Canada as well, they would go out to these far-flung places and take simple merchandise with them and sell bananas or anything that people might want to purchase out in the boondocks. And then they go back to the big city, restock, do it all over again. And eventually they'd make a parnasa. So that's all this guy wanted, right? To borrow, basically, merchandise and to make a little bit of extra money and give back the principal and then start a business. And that's what I assume Iska means in this context. Rashi actually makes a stab at it here. Rashi says, Iska, if you want to keep one hand to where you are in the Gemora, and then with the other hand, or something to look up above where we are, the first word in the line, Iska, Rashi does tight it up.
Schora.
Yeah, schora, which means merchandise. The summit, sin, not a... Right. From the word schar, to profit, a certain amount of money. The machzis schar, for half of the profit. In other words, he would give back to the owner half the profit. So he's basically giving them offering them a business deal. Let me take your merchandise. I'll run around selling it, and I'll take half the wages. Right? If you make a profit of $100, I'll get 50, and you'll get 50. It's also what's called by many a silent partner. Right? That's what most silent partners do. They provide the investment. The other person runs around, does all the running around and the hustling and all the upfront stuff, the front man, and then you have a profit that they split. So he wasn't even really asking for a proper handout, really. He was just asking for a leg up, as they call it. Give me a way in, a possibility of starting a business, and I'll give you half the profit, and I'll give myself half the profit.
So it's a great mitzvah, though, to give something like that.
That's right. That's
more than giving a handout.
That's right. Exactly. The Rambam says there's 7 levels of tzedakah. We said the highest level is if you help a person start out in business by giving them a loan, actually. Not necessarily giving a handout, because that preserves his dignity. So he asked, for a basic start in business through the normal means of someone fronting me merchandise, and I would split the profits with them. Unfortunately, what was the result of his importunity?
Lo
yavulei.
Didn't work.
They didn't. Yahav means what? They have a bank Yahav these days, which is funny. What does Yahav mean? The same root as Ahava, right? What's Ahava? Love. What does Reb Dessler say? How do you get to love to somebody? Give them. Right? Mothers love their children because they're always giving. That's Reb Dessler's proposition. The more you learn to give, the more you'll love. So the verb in Aramaic is to give. Lo yahavule, they
didn't love him.
Well, it really means giving, but that's how you produce love.
Yeah.
That's why there's a similar root, you could say. Anyhow, no, it means give in Aramaic. Well, Yahavule, they didn't give him. They didn't give him what he asked for. By the way, the Gemora says, why does a dog the whole day say, because it's saying, give me. Right, which is a word to the wise. Don't be like a dog that just say, give.
Walt Disney learned his full lesson from Disney.
I'm not sure. Was he Jewish?
No.
He was anti-Semite.
Anti-Semite. The daughter especially.
Yeah.
The Jews.
Is he American?
Yeah.
Must have a lot of Jewish artists working for them.
Really?
Must have a lot of Jewish artists working for them.
I'm sure.
All right,
You find
so
some of the cartoons that have Yiddishisms thrown in. You wonder where they got these things.
yeah, he was using them. Probably he was ripping them off. Okay, so what happened in Bavel? The poor Shabbatai, the mariner. What happened, Jack? In your
He didn't get what he asked for. He made a request.
stage one, he didn't get what? An opportunity
Didn't extend
to
it.
go into business, right? A simple loan, as it were. And that's why they talk about borrowing with ribis. That if you use a heter iska, what's the heter iska? Because just like he was saying over here, give me a certain amount, I'm going to give it back to you with a bit of interest, basically. That's what he said.
Yeah.
I'll give you 50%. So they're going to give him, let's say, 100 bottles of wine. He's going to go out and sell it, and they're going to get back the principal plus half the profit.
Yeah.
So they're getting back from a loan profit.
Yeah.
What's that called when you profit from a loan? Ribis. But how do you get around it? To be able to do it properly in halacha? Heter iska. That means exactly what we see here. That you say, I'm not giving you a loan, we're going into business together. The way the business works is I'm providing half, or I'm providing a certain thing, and you're providing a certain thing, and we split the profits. That's why it looks like I'm getting back a profit on the loan, but that's not really how it is. It's an investment.
The business.
So that's how a heter iska is set up, exactly as he wanted to have it here. That it's, in a sense, going into business with this person who's lending you. And they're not really lending you per se, they're giving you a certain amount of, and you're going to go and turn into a profit, and that profit you're going to share. So it looks like they're getting back the profit on their loan, but that's not really how it's set up. So therefore, a proper heter iska, make sure the wording of it shows that it's not a loan, and rather it's a business.
Is that where the word Issachar comes from?
That's where what?
Issachar comes from.
Yisachar. I don't know. The truth is that in the Torah, one of the Shvatim was named Yisachar, and it's actually Yisaschar, spelled with two sins. But it says that each one of the Shvatim got his name based on something that was happening at the time between the Imahos, specifically Rachel and Leah. And I think at that time they made a kind of a deal that, you know, you give me the Dudayim, and I let you sleep with Yaakov on the night that's supposed to be mine. So in a sense, they did a business deal, an iska. They did an iska.
That's where he comes from.
So therefore, it's as if she like rented out her husband. So she made a deal. She got rewarded for the business deal by getting this son, who she called Yisachar. Okay, so let's get back to the story. So end of chapter 1, he asks from these wealthy people, please help me set me up in business and I'll split the profits with you, and I'm a very industrious guy, and don't worry, and you're not throwing your money away. But what did they do? Rather, they worried and they thought they're throwing their money away and they weren't interested. Right? That was step 1. Step 2. The word you wanted to read with Lo Yahavu Lein, and I didn't let you.
Zone.
That means the same thing happened with Mazonos. He wanted them to at least give him food, at least a tangerine, something.
Zan. Nami. Lo. Zinugu. Didn't give him food either.
That's right. He said, look, if you're not going to help me set me up in business, at least don't let me starve. Give me some food at least. And then did that work?
No.
So what did he conclude?
Honey.
Amar.
Honey.
Who's Amar?
He said.
Who's he?
The fellow asked him.
Hmm?
The fellow asked him.
Who's the main subject of our story here? Who's the star of our movie? Mm-hmm. Our old friend Shabbatai. After twice they mistreated him, wouldn't give him a good business deal that he was asking for. He wouldn't even give him food to eat.
He said.
Sounds like the way that the angels are treated in Sodom.
Yeah.
What happened then? He said, he concluded, so what's atu in Aramaic? Do you know what that word atu means in Aramaic? Sometimes you have the same word, but without a vav ending, you have a yud ending. Ati. Familiar with that?
I just remember I heard it before.
Good, that's half the battle. Atu, like an argument, means they came. It's like ba'u in Hebrew. And ati, if it would have had a yud at the end, would mean he came. Like the word ba, just base aleph in Hebrew.
As soon as they came.
So it's the end. That's the verb of the sentence. What the whole sentence means. Use that as a basis for translating the whole sentence. Then these guys came from. Now go backwards in the sentence. That's the verb. Now go backwards to what he's actually saying. They came what? Right? That's how they do it in Aramaic. They put the verb at the end of the sentence. But really you have to go backwards to understand the sentence. After you've seen the verb, you have to use that verb as the beginning of an English sentence, and then finish the sentence with the rest of the words. They came what? One more word. Are you familiar with that expression? Who are they?
I came out of Egypt with you.
Right. Like the rabble, right? Not really Jews. There were Egyptians.
Mixed multitude.
But mixed of what?
Like Jews plus
No, they weren't Jews. They weren't Jews. They were non-Jews. Why did they leave Mitzrayim? What were they looking for? So anything better than here.
Advantage.
Anything better than here, right?
Yeah. Took advantage.
They took advantage of the fact that now they have a way of running away. They probably owed money, they probably didn't have anything to lose, so they ran with the Jews, who apparently were in God's favor and were doing well and were heading for somewhere that must be better, and therefore they came along, they dragged along. So therefore, what's he claiming? What's this Shabbatai Bar Marino's claiming? What's his claim then? Put it all together. What's he saying about them in response to what they just did to him?
Weren't such good people.
Weren't such good people. It's more than that. If they're from the Erev Rav, what's he really saying about them?
No good.
More. Say more than that.
Evil.
Hmm?
For many. Evil.
Evil, but it's more than that. Are they even Jewish?
Not even Jewish.
Not even Jewish. Even though the truth is, let's say the Erev Rav that came out of Egypt might not have been Jewish, but they may have intermarried in some later stage.
Yeah.
That's why, by the way, when they sinned on the golden calf, who were the main instigators? The Erev Rav. So when Hashem tells Moshe, who at that time was still up on Har Sinai, still in heaven, receiving the actual luchos, Hashem informed him that what? How do you know how he informed Moshe that these people had sinned? You know what he called them? Your people. Amich. He says, your people have sinned. Amich. Rashi says, why is Hashem referring to them as, if they're Jews, they're his people, not Moshe's people. They're Hashem's people.
Yeah.
Why should he call them Moshe's people?
They had got a kesher with them. He wanted to get them out.
I don't know if he wanted, but he agreed that they could come out. He didn't protest when they came out. Maybe figured it's good PR. You know, we helped some stragglers. We helped these people. These people weren't doing well in Mitzrayim, so why don't we bring them along? But was that a good move? No. Hashem was saying, look what happened to those people that you thought it's a good idea to bring them out. They end up doing avodah zarah. They end up making the entire nation sin. Wasn't a good geschäft.
No, the lefties.
And Rev Elchanan Wasserman wrote an essay in his famous book of essays on more ethical things called Kovitz Maimarim. If you've ever read it, it's very, very important. And he speaks very strongly there about how the communists and the others that are the Bundists and all these people, Zionists even, who weren't necessarily ethical people, he felt that they come from the Arab world. That's why they could do such horrible things. Very often they were, like we see in the Kapos, for example, in World War II, they were worse sometimes to the Jews than the Goyim. The theory is because they weren't Jews in the end of the day. They were really descended from these Mitzrim, who were very cruel people. So if he said they're from the Erev Rav, saying a very nasty thing about them, basically saying they're not Jewish. Now why would he do that? Why would he say these people are not Jewish?
Because the very essence of a Jew is kindness and racham.
Exactly. These people are acting against the very essence of a Jew. Right? So one person, let's say, had a bad day, you know, his wife yelled at him, or she dropped the baby, or something like that. Well, you have a bad day, you didn't react properly, but it doesn't say one person did it to him in Bubble. He spoke about the entire group. They all mistreated him. They all refused to give him even a morsel of bread. Forget about helping him out in business. And we were saying yesterday that we assumed that this did not happen on day one when he came from Bavel, when he came to Bavel. Because if a guy shows up and day one asks for, you know, help me out in business, help me out in this, it's a bit of an outlandish claim, right? If you haven't got to know him, what's the hope that you're going to get a proper treatment, right? What usually happens is the guy shows up, davens in the minyan for a while, week, 2 weeks, right? Maybe even up to a month, because in Judaism, after a month, a person's status changes. He becomes part of, like the group of people who live in that place. He's like part of the place already. That's why you don't put up a mezuzah unless you're going to be there for 30 days. And halachas have about to change after a person's been there for 30 days. You have to provide him with much more because it's considered to be from that place. So I imagine this whole story happened not in the way that it's necessarily presented here. As we know, there's a lot of, it's a very terse account here. It's not a full account. So it may be part of the details that are being left out to some extent are that he was there for a number of weeks. So they got to know him. They knew he wasn't some irresponsible guy, okay? Although it is possible that he's a bit of a charlatan and they just don't know it. Maybe he's just a good actor. But at least to feed him, right? They didn't even feed him. That was strange, right? They had reason to believe he was a responsible guy, and they didn't. That is one of the better things today, right? Because instead of just denying someone today, you could actually look them up on the internet and see what his background is. Are there any bad stories about this guy in other places? Has been known to cause trouble or rip people off or do anything untoward? In those days, they didn't have that. At least they had a sort of a sixth sense of who these guys were. If he's been around for a few weeks, keep your eye on him, see if he looks like a tzaddik or not. Even Shabbatai Tzvi, who had fooled a lot of people into thinking he was a tzaddik, the gedolim of that day, there were people who sent shluchim to go check out Shabbatai Tzvi. Because a lot of people were skeptical of this guy, supposedly Mashiach, supposedly whatever, and they took a good look at him. They looked at him in the morning, in the evening, this and that. They finally concluded he was a fake. You know what the big sign was? One of the big signs was the way he slept. He slept on his back. A Jew's not supposed to go to sleep on his back. It's a bad sign. So even if you say like an unlearned person might, he was supposedly a Talmid Chacham. Apparently, one of the ways he used to convince people is he said the Shem Hashem. He said the real Shem Hashem, the way it's written, which also is a bit of a question, but at least that shows that he's trying to be a tzaddik, and he was supposedly a Talmid Chacham. He fooled a lot of even the Gedolim. They had to really look hard to see these cracks in the veneer.
Who are the Frankists?
Sorry?
Who are the Frankists?
Well, there is a term, Frank, which is, I think, a derogatory terminology against the Spartan. I don't know if that's a Jew. It might have been a group of people who were in politics, I think.
No, you got the Frank.
I don't know. In any event, just mentioning that this is a time-honored system of trying to understand who a person is by observing him. So I assume that they had time to observe him, because if not, what's the taina? Because someone comes and asks to set me up in business, and they've never seen him before. No one here has ever seen the guy before. I don't think that would be called a taina against them. If he's saying because of the way they treated me, they're going down to Gehenna, and they're from the Erev Rav, that's pretty strong language. And if he's off his rocker, so the Gemora shouldn't have put in the Gemora. We didn't have it in our Gemora as like a true story. The Gemora is supporting what he said here, right? So if he has a good time against them, it must be they had a reason to, yes, honor his requests. And that wouldn't happen on day one. I'm asserting that it makes sense that the story happened over a period of time where they had time to observe him. Okay, let's go on. So he said, how does he know they're from the Erev Rav? Which essentially is saying they're not Jewish.
Yes.
Because you want to continue reading, or are you getting tired? That's the end of the sentence, right? Hani, these people, me'erev rav ka'asu. Asu, we said, means they came, or they come, who's they came from, or they come from, the Erev Rav. That's who they're descended from. This is certainly not Jewish. How does he know that? Alright, now Shabbatai is going to explain this pasuk to you. I became an expert yesterday in this pasuk. Yeah. I'm sticking my neck out that I'm claiming that you know this well. It looked like you caught it yesterday. Did you catch it yesterday, what this pasuk is all about?
It's a pasuk where Hashem says, I'll give you rachamim.
In who's he talking to? Who needs to be given rachamim?
Jews. Huh?
More than
Abraham.
No. Which part of the Chumash is it in?
Devarim.
And what happens in Devarim? Nothing, right? It's Moshe Rabbeinu just giving his last speech, 36-day speech.
Why did you speak for 36 days?
If you knew everything he knew, then it wouldn't be hard. A lot of it was review. That's why it's called Mishnah Torah. It's a repetition. A lot of it were new halachas that he threw in there. So what's one of the things he said to them in Devarim, in his farewell speech? You have a mitzvah that if you have a city that what?
It's a Irani Dachas.
Yes. Keep running with the football.
Hashem wants us
First, what is it, Irani Dachas? So Jack, make sure
wants
Jack
to
understands
Jews to
you.
Worship with Zara, worship idols.
Idol worshippers.
Yes, Hashem gives us a command to destroy the city. Hashem said that if you destroy the city, Hashem will give you more rachamim. Because you think that destroying the entire city is an act of cruelty. People are worried that they get very cruel and not have any mercy as to wipe out the entire city. But Hashem said, if you do that, I'll give you rachamim despite.
Very good, very good. We compared it to the Chazal that says, Rov Rovim L'Gehenna. Are you aware of that? That the doctors have a bad rap?
Painfully aware.
That's not just these rich people in Bavel. There's apparently a lot of doctors who are going to end up in Gehenna as well.
Club.
Rov. Most. Of course, not the ones that come to my shir, but
Why is it that? Because they're arrogant? They think
first of all, they're arrogant.
They think they're doing the healing, right?
That's part of it. But I also explained yesterday, in line with this Gemora, I used the Alter Mikelm's approach.
But they don't have rachamim.
But why? Why would they be prone to not having rachamim?
It's rote. It's everything's
No,
done by
because they're doing an act of cruelty.
Yeah.
In a sense, a doctor is a cruel person. Why? He's cutting open people. He's removing limbs sometimes. He's doing... A doctor has to be sometimes a very tough, what they call a stiff upper lip, in order to do what he needs to do. He knows it's important to amputate a leg, let's say. In the old days, that was much more common than today, Baruch Hashem. But even today, it happens sometimes. You have to make the call. You have to amputate. This person's going to be without a limb for the rest of his life. In those days, they didn't have prosthetics, mind you. And even then, it wasn't such a great method, right? You'd end up with a little Captain Hook prosthetic there. A hook for a hand and a peg for a leg. And he'd have a patch over his eye if you took, right? But sometimes you had to do that because otherwise he was going to die. But you're doing in order for the final goal, which is the higher goal of saving his life, you have to do acts of cruelty, right? Things that most people wouldn't be equipped to do. Most people wouldn't have the stomach to be a doctor because you have to do some pretty horrible things. You also have to be knee-high in blood half the time if you're a surgeon, right? And you also, even if you're just a family doctor, such as you have these people coming in who...
I'm pleased I didn't speak to you before I took up the profession.
Well, I'm just advocating what the Gemora says. So that's why it's actually a limud schus on doctors that it says they're going to go to Gehenna. Why would they go to Gehenna? They're doing a great thing. The answer is because the acts which they're doing are acts of cruelty on the surface. It's for the sake of a higher goal, right? But you can say the same thing, lahavdil, about the Nazis. You ask them, why did you kill all these people? For the higher goal, because to cleanse the world of these vermin. So theoretically, a doctor has put himself in a position where he's doing acts of cruelty, but for a higher purpose. Okay, so a good doctor will realize he's constantly, maybe because of what Shabbatai said, many of them are Gaiviniks, so they're left with the acts of cruelty and they're not benefiting. Like this pasuk says, if you do acts of cruelty, what's likely to happen to you? Right? The person's influenced by what he does. If every day you're stealing, you become a ganav. If every day you're saving lives, you become a good person. But it depends how you look at it. If you're just profiting off the misery of others, you become a horrible person, right? So there's like a potential. There's always a potential that the doctor will just become a cruel person. I've heard, although I don't know, for me it's a bit of apocrypha, but I've heard that doctors in surgery have very, very foul way of talking, very calloused way of talking. Because the patient's out, you can say whatever you want. And I read a book once where they said over all the things they used to say during surgery. It was a very cruel way of talking about the patient, about this and that. Sometimes because they have to, because just to counteract all the emotional drain of doing what they do. But in the end of the day, some of them become very cruel people, very callous people, very unloving people, unforgiving people.
Today they can't do it because most operations are done under epidural, where the patients are wide awake.
Well, I have to tell you, when I had my
The patient don't know
when
that.
my prostate was operated on, when my prostate was operated on, you're right, I was aware, I could hear what was going on, but it was all like a bit of a dream. But I could hear, but I did not hear him saying, you know, he was talking to the students who he was trying to instruct at the same time, and it just sounded very callous to me. I did not feel like he was being nice to me. You know, obviously I needed this operation, and in the end of the day, it was a very, you know, it was a chesed in that sense. But I did feel that my doctor was a bit calloused, you know. I know it happened to my wife one time. She had this problem with carpal tunnel when she was expecting. And the doctor knew she was expecting. He hooked her up to this whole contraption and then sent an electric current through her body. Did not even warn her she's going to be getting an electric current. She felt like she was being electrocuted. And she was and she was pregnant. She could have miscarried theoretically, but he didn't care. Right? And he's talking to all of his students, do you see this, do you see that, showing them on the chart, and this and that, very calmly, while she's suffering. Yeah, here it was in Hearts of Fame, I think. So it can happen that the people become very calloused, and like they may not even work on someone unless it's going to improve their standing, or, you know, right, or you know, give them a higher position because they've accomplished. If they say, I might lose this patient, but he really needs help, then they may not do it, because I don't want on my record that I lost this patient. I needs help, and you're the only one who can really help him. Again, very often they show callousness. The theory of the Alter Mikelma is, how did that happen? Because you're doing an act of cruelty, when you cut people open and so on and so forth, it can generate within the person a cruel nature. Unless he works on himself, unless he keeps himself, you know, connected to the proper ideology, etc., proper mitos.
No, it wasn't a cruel psychiatrist.
Okay, well, each profession has a certain cruelty. Each profession, anybody in any profession. The truth is, anyone in a position of power also can be very cruel, because they like to use their power. They also start to feel like they're better than everyone else.
The psychiatry
They don't-
world, so
Huh?
notorious for.
So everybody has to be careful, because we're always in a position of where we can abuse our power, or we can start to think we're better than we are. But this is an interesting Gemora, because this tells us the key to success. What's the key to success? Here, the Jews had to destroy an entire city, which is not only the city physically, they had to kill people who lived in that city. And I think everybody in the city had to be killed, because the entire city was deemed to have done a blood. And even men, women, and children, right? So this is an act of cruelty on the surface. How do they know that if they do this, they won't become cruel people? Right? Because that's what we said, that a person does acts of cruelty, it makes him into a cruel person in the end, unless he's extremely careful. How can they be sure if they do this mitzvah of Ir Nidachas that they're not going to end up becoming cruel people and losing their Jewish midos, as it were?
What is the word dachas mean?
It's nidche. Nidche from the word doche. Doche is to push. Nidche means to be pushed away. Like when you have a Tisha B'Av that should have been on a certain day, but because it falls on Shabbos, it's nidche, it's pushed off.
Was it a eerie?
So this whole place is being pushed away from existence, really. Pushed away from being part of the Jewish nation. Basically being wiped out. That's really would have been a better, just call it an Ir Hava Shoah. A city that's annihilated. Beridachas is like a nicer way of saying it. But in any event, so you know what Hashem says? You know what Hashem says? Don't worry. It's a very important mitzvah. I told you to do it, and I'm giving you a guarantee, right? I'm the manufacturer. I've made you, I made this, I made everything. And I know how you work, and I know everything. So I'm guaranteeing you will not become cruel. That's what it says in this pasuk. So Moshe Rabbeinu tells them they have to do this mitzvah, but Hashem has promised that we won't lose our mercy, our vida of tova, of the mercy. How does he say it? V'nosam lecha rachamim. Hashem will give you rachamim. And then how do we know it will work? How do we know we're going to be then nice to other people? That's the second one. V'richamecha. It says, Nosam lecha rachamim. Hashem will give you rachamim. V'richamecha. And he will literally have mercy on you. But Rashi said, the Amaletic interpretation is that you will then have mercy on other people. That shows that it's going to work. You're going to be given a midah of rachamim that's going to work to make you a Baal Rachamim to be nice to other people. Nosam lecha rachamim. How do I know it'll work? Because it's a promise. V'richamecha. And you will then be nice to other people. You will then have compassion upon other people. So even after this huge act of cruelty, Hashem is promising that because you're doing it as a mitzvah, and you're doing it to listen to Hashem, He will give you the siyata d'shmaya to make sure you don't become like Rofim with Gehenna. Don't let the act of cruelty make you into a different, lower creature. But that's what we learn. Kol
Merachim al Brios, the Yadua Shehu Zero Shel Avraham.
Avinu. So Chazal say a statement here, which is a very important rule in life, that anybody who is merachim al brios,
who's kind to people,
right?
is part of the Zera of Avraham.
It's known. We can know. In other words, without running a genealogy test or a DNA test, we can know he's from the seed of Avraham Avinu, right? He's showing that he's related to Avraham Avinu because he's acting like Avraham Avinu. But if it's the other way around,
he's not a
Kol mi she'ena merachim al brios, anyone who doesn't have compassion on his fellow creatures, fellow human beings, then it's biyadua. Then you can know, again, without taking any DNA testing, she'eno Yizar Shel Avraham Avinu, right? Then you know he's not, because if he were from the Zera of Avraham Avinu, he would have acted properly. So we're saying two things here. First of all, a normal Jew acts this in a normal, compassionate way because he comes from Avraham Avinu. It's in his genes, his spiritual genes. And there's a lot of other things we inherit from Avraham Avinu, like the love of Eretz Yisrael and the Mesiras Nefesh to get to Eretz Yisrael. A lot of things we inherit from Avraham Avinu. One of them is to act with compassion. These people are acting without compassion. They must be not from the Jewish nation. If they're not from the Jewish nation, why do they look like they're from the Jewish nation? Why are they in our community? Because just like the Erev Rav became part of the functional community, but they really weren't Jews, so too there's a lot of people sort of hanging around who, if you really want to know where they come from, look at the way they act. That's what it's saying over here. So this Shabbatai Bar Marinus, obviously he knew a bit of Torah, because he's speaking a lot of Torah over here. And he's saying, if they really would have been merciful, then I would have known they're from Avraham Avinu. If not, I know where they're from now. You know where they're from? They're from. And you know where they're headed? It said before they're headed to Gehenna. Right? Because if you're not merciful, right, then Hashem has no reason to be merciful upon you. The only reason why Hashem shows us mercy, it says there was once a machlokus, and I think Alexander the Great was there, and he said we would have just killed both people and take away the land. And I think
dispute.
Yeah. So they said, well, are there animals who live in your kingdom? He says, yes. He said, that's why Hashem is nice to you, because of the animals that you take care of. Because otherwise, as far as Hashem's concerned, you are not worth keeping. People just kill the two litigants and take away the land for the king, but
Not a big.
It's an
not a big
Erev Rav
mitzvah.
type of move, right? It's a
Not a
cruelty, right? But the Goyim don't mind being cruel, just killing people indiscriminately for a profit. In any event, okay, so this extremely bitter critique of these wealthy people in Bavel, right? He was convinced that if they showed such cruelty to him when they obviously should have been nice to him, then there must be something wrong with these people. They must be from the Erev Rav, and likewise, the Gemora said before, they're headed for Gehenna. Okay. So that's another thing that we have in the name of Rav Nassan bar Abba Amarav. A third thing that he said, Amarav Nassan bar Abba Amarav. Who would like to read this last section?
Me?
Well, maybe Shabbatai bar Marinus would like to read it. I'm reading about him, but he hasn't had a chance to read.
Amarav. Okay. Natan
Very
Bar
good. So that
Amarav.
vav is fitting because it's now another. That's the only reason we're bringing, because another statement in of these very unusual Rebbeim don't always appear. At least Rav does, but if someone's saying in the name of Rav, this person, Rav Nassan bar Abba, doesn't appear that often to say things in the name of Rav. The third thing he said was what?
He said,
Mitzapeh.
Mitzapeh al Shulchan Achrim. Everyone who looks at someone else's table,
That's how you learn it? He's just looking at someone else's table, like looking through the living room window at the next neighbor?
He wants to be part of it. He wants to
Okay. So mitzapeh is more than just looking, by the way. It's true. The root of that word is to look out. Sofeh is to look out. Like a lookout point when you're driving around the country, you see that they advertise, this has a lookout point. It's called a mitzvah, like mitzvah Yericho, same root. You're right. But when we get to the next world, you know what the first question they're going to ask us is?
Did you do business?
That's true. So it's maybe not the first one. I think some say it is the first.
Did you put Torah?
Si pisa Yeshua. Si pisa Yeshua. Do you know that's one of the 6 questions they ask? Si pisa.
Waiting for Mashiach.
Right. But it's more than just waiting. It's like they call it yearning.
Yearning.
It's like, imagine that you're at like a lookout point and you're waiting for your beloved to come back. That's called looking out. Looking is not just looking. It means like you're yearning for it. You're like, oh, I see Dad coming. Like when you're at the airport and you're waiting for someone to come. That's this thing. You're hoping. It's like an expectation, right? So I actually translated it that way yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. That mitzapeh can also mean to expect something to be coming. I'm expecting it. I'm sitting and waiting for it. But it's also like expecting it to happen.
You did say that.
So this is a fellow who's kind of expecting it to be given to him. He's expecting to be invited over by people and to receive a handout, right? Basically, it's not his own family he's talking about. He's talking about basically being given charity by other people, that they let him eat by their achnasas orchim, etc. So it's one thing to go by and be invited, or one thing to actually partake from time to time, but to actually expect it to happen, right? Like they say today, he's expecting it. He's expecting this handout. That gets to be a situation in life which is not pleasant. It's one thing to say, well, thank you for this gift, but to expect it. So it's kind of like looking forward to it and expecting it to come, and that kind of expecting. But sometimes it's good to do that. Like Tzipisa Yeshua, it's good to look forward to Mashiach coming and every day feel like he's probably here. Let me check the news, and maybe it'll say Mashiach's here. Like that's the way we should kind of feel when we get up in the morning. Maybe he came today, and I'm waiting for him already a long time. But here, it's not good. Because what happens to this person who's doing that, who's sort of expecting a handout from people inviting him over.
עולם חושך בידו.
So it's either referring to the next world will be a world of darkness,
Right.
ba'ado, for him, or maybe it even means this world. So it sounds, from what I see, the Gemora saying afterwards, that it's even this world. He's talking about his life is not a good life even here. But maybe the first part is he's not going to get a good place in Olam Haba. He's going to have like an Olam Choshech. And even in this world, he'll have problems. But maybe it even means in this world that, if he hasn't learned to make a living, he hasn't learned to fend for himself, and he's always looking for handouts, it becomes a very bad life here. Like you'd end up in the street like these homeless people. You ask them, why aren't you working? Well, people, the state should be giving me, and the people aren't helping me enough, He doesn't look at it that he's not doing enough. He looks at the people who he expected to give him aren't doing enough. That just ends up being a dark world where he ends up in the street and he ends up disappointed and he ends up destitute. So it could be even in this world. But in any event, Shana Amar. We have a pasuk that may be the key here.
Goded hu lelechem higher. So he wanders, or he searches for bread, and wonders where it is.
Right, so this implies again that a person's sort of expecting it to come to him, so he's looking around. Where's the next person who's going to give him food? So that is his situation. What happens to him?
Okay.
Yeda, you should know.
Ki nachon. You should know that it's prepared.
It's prepared, it's ready. Where? Biyado, it's in his hand.
Biyado, in his hand.
What's happened? What's prepared in his hand?
Biyado kosher.
The day of darkness. So it could be that it means in the next world, but I don't see it as like a proper reason to go to Gehenna. He's not like necessarily doing an Avera over here, but it's definitely he's leading a lifestyle which doesn't lead to good things. So maybe it's like saying, today it looks like people are giving you handouts, so you're happy. But if you become used to that, in the very end, it's going to end up being a dark day, because when they don't, what's going to happen? You have no idea how to make your way in the world. You're just used to taking handouts, so you're not even able to fend for yourself, and then you'll end up under the bridge somewhere in the middle of Timbuktu, wondering what happened. Okay, now.
So that's what we got up to yesterday.
So that could be referring to the next world, could be referring to this world. So Rav Chizda might be the key. Rav Chizda Amar, you want to read Yisraeli?
Yeah.
You know where we are? Chayav.
Even his life is not considered life.
Right. He's not really living properly. His life isn't a life, right? So it could mean that even while they are giving him handouts, that's not a life. Why is that not a life? He feels happy on the one hand that people are giving him handouts, because what's the truth is? Wait, what's the truth?
He's always worried.
Is a person happy to get handouts?
No.
No. So they say that that's why Hashem created this world. You know why Hashem created this world? Because if we would have just gone to Gan Eden to get our reward without having earned it in this world, Zohar says that would have been like Nahama the Kasufa, bread of embarrassment. Right? Like a person gets a handout, bread of shame. Right? So Hashem wants us to, when we get to the world where we get rewarded, to feel like we earned it somewhat. Obviously, it's still going to be with Siyata D'Shmai and everything. We didn't really earn it because Hashem was helping us the whole way. But at least we have some feeling like we earned it. Whereas if we would just go directly to Gan Eden without having earned it, we'd be embarrassed on some level. Even a spiritual being that had never been in this world would still be embarrassed. There's a certain type of embarrassment that the soul feels when it didn't earn something. So maybe that's what it means. In the end of the day, that's going to be Choshech, because he'll end up under some bridge in Hackensack, New Jersey, looking in the dirt for food. That's a dark day. But even when days are good, they're giving him the soup kitchen, they're giving him this or even like someone who's like more well-to-do. You know, his parents are providing him with his every need, but the problem with that is that somewhere down deep he's embarrassed and he has no self-esteem because he doesn't really know if he's really a worthy human being. He just gets handouts, right? So he's embarrassed, like we said, and he's also doesn't even know if he has any worth at all as a human being. And everybody else who's accomplishing, he doesn't partake in that joy of having accomplished, which is really what gives a person true satisfaction in this world, is when he works towards a goal and he accomplishes.
Like for my example, working for the Yeshiva, collecting money.
That's right. Helping Yeshiva is a tremendous mitzvah. But, you know, a person who is getting a handout, he doesn't even feel that joy of having worked towards a goal, or even helping other people, right? You could say also part of the joy of life is helping other people. And this guy is just taking. That's what Rav Dessler says at the beginning of Nechtam Eliyahu. The reason why most people are sad in this world in the end of the day is because they've gotten used to taking and not to giving. Giving is what really makes a person happy in the end. Go ask Bill Gates and Buffett, whatever, right? They're trying to convince the rest of the world to do tzedakah because there's no joy if you just keep all the money for yourself. So even this person in his life, while he's getting handouts, still not going to be pleasant for him. Okay, let's go on. Tana Rabbanan, who would like to read? Jack, you want to be back in the reading seat?
Yeah, Tana Rabbanan, Gimel
Chayehem.
Einam Chayim.
Okay, so which we just had a similar expression. That's why it's obviously bringing down that, right?
So their life is really not alive.
So how many people suffer that?
3.
Well, and who are they? The Elohim.
Elohim, these are the ones. And the Tzape, the Shulchan Chaveiro, one who is looking at the table with his friend.
And expecting to be invited over.
Mi she ishto moshelet alav.
This is pretty biting.
Yeah, his wife is governing him.
Ruling over him, right? She rules over him. It's not saying sometimes a wife can make a decision, obviously. That's how a good marriage works. You share decisions, or some things are allocated to different people, but she's ruling over him, like she makes all the decisions. He's just like a private in her army. That's not good. He feels degraded. Right, someone who has like not just incidental pain. Moshel means it's ruling over him. He's suffering on a chronic level, chronically suffering, and physically, eventually, it just takes its toll. A person, very hard for him to bear that suffering on a constant basis. So that's horrible. That's horrible, especially today, because the alternative is to take painkillers, which make a person lose his life as well through all these
Chemicals.
opioids, as they call them today. Okay, so that's 3, and Yesh Omrim. Some people say
Af mi she'ein lo ela chaluk
Echad.
He doesn't have
He only has one shirt,
one shirt.
or one robe, right? Which actually say about Rav Shach, that he used to have only one shirt. When he was a buffer in Europe, he was orphaned and he didn't have anything. He had one shirt. And he used to, on Erev Shabbos, he used to go up to the roof and take off that one shirt he had, which means in the middle of the winter he wasn't wearing any shirt, and he would wash it and hang it up to dry, and when it was finally dry, he had at least a clean shirt for Shabbos. And I'm sure most people didn't have the guts to do that, so they end up having problems. Okay, we'll see in a minute what Rashi says. What's the big problem with that? Let's see the Rashi on that. Shruli. Misha Eino Ela Chaluk Echad. Someone who only has one shirt. What's the big problem? He's not able to wash it, right? Because he didn't think like Rav Shach that he'll go up to the roof and take off his one shirt and wash it. So they don't like washing it. So what's wrong with having a shirt that you don't wash? ended with lice, and lice caused him a lot of sorrows. Right? So that's the final line, is that he ends up not just with dirty clothing, but he ends up with lice in his clothing, and they give him a lot of sorrow, right? Because there's nothing worse than ongoing problem with lice.
It is soon and not present.
No. So I think we should go home and thank everybody involved in our lives that we don't have to live like this, Baruch Hashem. And then whoever gave you an extra shirt, now you know how much you have to thank them. Okay?
Should get a few shirts.
Yeah, we're very, very lucky. Right? The Tanakama, now the Gemora does what it often does to try to explain the Machlokus. Right? This is very true. Someone has one shirt, he should be listed as one of the people who has a miserable life, whose life is not a life. So why did the Tanakama not list it? Why only the Yesh Omrim listed it? So now the Gemora is going to explain. Why did Tanakama feel this is not the worst thing in the world to have only one shirt? You know why he did that? Why he didn't list it? Tanakama holds what? Shabtai, you want to read the last few words?
Yerushalyim,
B'maneh. Efshar, because it's always possible. To be ma'ayin, inspect, to look deeply into, from the word ayin, it's a verb.
To inspect the shirt.
Maneh, his mana. What's a mana?
Container.
Or a vessel, right?
Vessel.
I mean, in this case, the shirt, right? We've seen that kli can be anything, right? Charcoal could be a kli. So here, the shirt, certainly a kli. So basically, as I'm saying, why did the Tanakama feel it's not so bad? Because he could inspect the shirt. What happens when you inspect a shirt? Let's see, Rashi, ma'ayin b'maneh, would end up being what's called mifale eskelav min hakini. To clean out, to purify, to de-lice the shirt from its problem with keening, with lice, right? In other words, the Tanakama feels you can deal with it, right? It's hard, it's harsh, but you can de-lice a shirt, right? Most people know today what was the way that they used to de-lice shirts. This horrible smelling chemicals, lime or whatever.
So that's not included in the 3?
According to the Tanakama. That's the point. The Gemora asked, why didn't he include it? The Yesh Omrim explained very nicely why it's a really harsh thing. So why did the Tanakama not agree with that? Because he felt you can deal with it. If you can deal with it, then it's not the worst thing in the world.